Hi, everyone. We are going to get started. So I'd love to invite you to get a bite to eat if you haven't done that yet. And welcome to our second WIL CoP event. We're very excited about this. We're going to be focused, as you know, on rich, sustained partnerships for WIL. And I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're meeting today, the Wallomatic people of the Derrick Nation, and pay our respects to elders past and present. Partnerships are really important in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, and they're important to us at the university, and it's great to be here and sharing that and sharing ideas for being better in that space and doing better in that space. So I will start with a few announcements. And then, so upcoming events and announcements, I should not be turning around, but I have to at the moment. And then we will hear from Richie Howitt, our first guest speaker, who many of the people in the room already know. And he will be sharing a specific example of a very rich and sustained and award-winning partnership in a community-based partnership. And then we will have Kat Coates, who many people in the room also know, who will join us then with her corporate partnerships perspective, and we'll have a panel discussion. Thank you to people who, when you registered, shared questions. We've integrated those questions into the starting Q&A. And then there will be a chance for you to join in with your own questions, including on Zoom. So this is our first hybrid event for this year. So hopefully everybody on Zoom can see and hear. If you can't see or hear, please do note that in the chat, and we will make adjustments if we need to. And after the panel discussion with Richie and Kat, then we will invite your questions, panel discussion, and then we will have a little bit of time for discussion and reflection, and then networking to close. So that is the plan for the event. And the first announcement is actually from me. I will be going on OSP in the second half of the year. So I'm absolutely thrilled that we have our new distributed leadership model for the WIL CoP. I happen to chair the Professional Learning Events Subcommittee for WIL Australia. So if anybody is looking for an opportunity for a WIL leadership role that is outside of the university, which looks really great. If anybody's looking for that kind of leadership, please chat with me. Love to have you join that team. And the second announcement I'll come back to, it's Career Talk. I'll come back to that. And then upcoming events. We have our next WIL CoP, which is on the 7th of May. And there is also coming up on the 28th of April. I'm not sure why these are in reverse chronological order, but they are, like a CV. At the 28th of April is unlocking the potential of generative AI in WIL. And that's a joint event with WIL Australia and Cradle at Deakin, and it should be fantastic. They've developed some resources, which I've just tried in my classroom, and it was great, really rich resources. And then our next WIL CoP then shortly thereafter on the 7th of May. Can we go to the next slide? I promise I will not take up too much time with announcements, but I do want share. So about this Career Talk, it is a couple of academics in business analytics developed and piloted in an undergraduate and postgraduate business analytics unit of this AI tool called Career Talk. And the idea is that it gives students a chance to practice interview skills. So they have crossed off soft skills at the bottom. It's not about developing your interview skills, which I would call a professional skill or a soft skill, but it's more specifically, the reason they've crossed it off is that it's more specifically about gathering technical information on your discipline and what you specifically want them to have gotten out of their experience, their WIL experience in your unit. And then they can, and then they can do an interview with an AI. And if you go to the next slide, so the idea is that they're getting job market data and then all of your unit information. And then this little robot over here is putting that into a filter so that they get a customized question and then they respond to it. And then they get direct feedback on how they could have addressed it more fully. So really great tool. And the reason I've just given you so much background is that they're looking for WIL units, PACE units from across the university who might be interested in pilot testing it to take that pilot broader. And I could say lots more, but I think I'll leave it there. If you're interested, on this slide, which we will distribute at the end, you have Ali Amrullahi's information. And so if you contact him, he'll put you in touch with the team and talk through if it will be suitable for you. A great opportunity to pilot test that tool with your students. And that brings us to, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Richie Howitt to share with us an example from his experience.
Thank you. Who's that fat thing? I remember. Thank you for the opportunity. I wanted to start by saying, one, I've been retired from the university for 7 years, so I know nothing about the current structure of the university. I understand nothing about the current strategies of the university. So please forgive me if I'm old and out of date. But I want to start by saying that what we now call work integrated learning used to be something about a community of practice. And I used to say to my students very often, don't forget that the real world is in here. Yeah, that we give our students real world skills in what we do, in working to deadlines, working to multiple competing deadlines, working with reduced resources, having to be an independent learner. And I think what I wanted to start with was to say our labour as academic workers produces just two things. It produces graduates and ideas. My sense is that neither of those two things are on KPIs, that we actually measure success in terms of the wrong things in much of what we do. So I want to reflect just as briefly, and I've told Jen she's got to stop me as soon as she needs to, on what was called the Macquarie Ride Futures Project before we get to the Salvation Army project. The Macquarie Ride Futures Project came about because I stood up against the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research in the University Senate and asked him if the University Senate is the key academic governance body of the university, why wasn't he reporting to it regularly? And his response was research was too important to leave to the academics, and that he didn't need to report. He eventually admitted he was wrong on that and that he should have been reporting, but he still didn't report. As punishment for me standing up, he had a little bucket of money left over at the end of 1 year. And he said, I think he was offering it as punishment. I never saw it as a punishment. He gave me $250,000 to solve the university's relationship with the City of Ryde. The City of Ryde had no relationship with Macquarie University, except they'd taken us to court to try and get us to pay taxes, to pay rates on the land, and failed. And they ignored us for 25 years. There was a very innovative general manager there, John Nish, who said, how can it be we've got a global university in our precinct and we don't have a relationship? So John and I worked together really closely to say, yeah, this is a relationship that matters. My line to the university was, if we're going to be a global university, the first significant footprint we leave is the footprint we leave in our local community. And if we don't have strong relationships with our local community, then we will be seen as a problem. We'll be a housing problem, will be an employment problem, will be a diversity problem. We have lots of international students who will be seen as a problem if they're not seen as a resource. Oh, does that seem to echo current discourses? We went about trying to see what we could do. We signed a memorandum of understanding. For those who have been around long enough, Stephen Schwartz signed this memo of understanding with the Lord Mayor, saying we would develop a multi-dimensional partnership. One of this project, the Racism That Stops With Me stuff, came about because there was a lot of anti-Chinese, anti-Asian racism around the city of Ryde. I've got no idea when that was because 1992 only seems a short time ago to me, but apparently it's a long time ago. That tells me. In the early 2000s, there was a very virulent anti-Asian campaign. So we worked with the Racism That Stops With Me. We did with Iqbal Barker in film, media, whatever it's called. So I've got that no discussion. We're apparently in the same school now. Very innovative. We made a film, so we ended up having multiple dimensions. I worked with not just every faculty, I worked with almost every department of the academic university and almost every department in council. We had some language problems. I should talk about community partners as well. We worked with Fungbai Chinese community language school. We worked with Salvation Army, worked with anybody who wanted to work with us, we'd work with. We would find a way of working with people. We worked very closely also with property and sustainability. So we actually had what turned out to be, I think, a work integrated learning project, trying to get the sustainability the environmental footprint of every building on the campus, and to set up a student stewardship project where students would be monitoring and intervening in the environmental footprint of every building on campus on a sustainable basis, so that third-year students would be tutoring first-year students and bringing them in to management teams to do that monitoring and intervention. So I ended up in that role being the only academic in the Chief Operating Officer's management team, which meant I sat in Monday morning meetings with the entirety of the senior functional management of the university, and had to, my boss, Tim Beresford, asked me at one stage to give a talk about working across the silos. And I started by saying, well, you know, we would all imagine how terrific the university would be, how easily it would work, how it would be great to get parking if we didn't have academics and we didn't have students. But the thing to remind all of the people in the offices is it wouldn't be a university. Yeah? But I think the thing that it's really easy for academics to forget is, as I said, we produce two things, ideas and graduates. And how do we produce the best of those? We talked about that we're apparently a school of communications. You want me to make two more points?
In about 2 minutes.
2 points.
That communication is absolutely critical, and that it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. And one of the things that I've learned is that in talking to another body of professionals like local government, there's a language problem. I'll just point to one word that we have a problem with, the word project. A project and deadlines. Yeah, a project for an academic is something that's funded and you get to it whenever you can, between teaching, marking and form filling and being frustrated with whatever's going on. And you do that work towards that project. projects in local government have timelines, reporting deadlines, and they have to be met. Yeah, they're legislated. So that term project became one of my key markers for how do you build a relationship. You recognise that you speak different languages and you work on being the moderator in that work. So trying to get academics to understand that I wasn't going to be a source of research funds from local government. We should all understand local government isn't particularly well endowed and well resourced, and it's got its own agenda. So it's about how do you communicate to find mutual needs, and then how do you actually inspire students? So I should talk a little bit about Salvation Army. We worked on understanding what was going on in the Ivanhoe public housing estate, which has now got another name. It's not called Ivanhoe Part 2 anymore. It's called something else, but it's on the corner of Herring Road and Epping Road. And it used to be a public housing estate. It got demolished and redeveloped by Frasers. And all the people got kicked out. We wanted to know what happened to them. How were they being addressed? We had film students, we had sociology students, we had geography students, we had psychology students, we had projects that ran over a 3-year time frame, yeah, that brought people together to work with community, with local government, with state government to solve or to address, didn't solve it because they still got kicked out, but to understand those processes of social change. Those students went out. I'll tell one more point. Real world skills, interviewing. You just talked about interviewing skills. We, Iqbal and I were teaching students how to do interviews, but Iqbal was teaching them how to do film interviews, and I was teaching them how to do social science research interviews. And we realised we were talking different languages. I have to say that those classes where we taught those two things in sync and worked out how to do them together were just like walking a tightrope in front of the students, where they all realised that they were in a real world learning situation. And those students still come back to me and ask for references, yeah, because that was learning that mattered. So in building those relationships, we actually, I think, produced great graduates and great ideas, yeah. Some of it didn't really matter to the university. When they couldn't find the money I left when I retired and let the whole relationship dissolve, I was convinced.
Can you join me? And please join me in welcoming Kat to join us. I always forget to say something in my introduction, and the thing that I forgot today was to acknowledge that Penny Sweeting was supposed to be here. Unfortunately, at the last minute, she couldn't be here. She was going to be emceeing. She was my co-coordinator for this event. And so I would like to thank Jacqueline and Kate for jumping in to help with the logistics right at the last minute.
Testing department.
And I also, and admitting people and this and that. I'd also like to just note that when Richie started, he said, it's been a few years since I've been here at the university and I don't know kind of current operations. We have a plan for that.
For me not knowing.
We, not specifically, but we asked Kate, Maitland and Min, Kate and Min, to be here and help with, if we start talking in an ideal way that doesn't have its feet on the ground. Yes, Kate and Min are going to help keep us grounded.
Reality check.
Yes, they are here for our reality check. So with that, we got to hear a little bit about what Richie has been doing in the partnership space since 1992. And so at this point, I'd love to invite you, Kat, to tell us a little bit about your experience with partnerships.
Thank you. And I'm honoured to be here with Richie from the experience that you've already spoken about. I actually have a lot to say to that because those two partnerships are very critical and still alive today because of you. So, and I think that will probably point out the fact that partnerships take a long time, a lot of growth and strategy behind it. But 92, 24, quite fresh, quite recent in the Macquarie University landscape. But I guess the lens that I'll bring today is more so my corporate background. So I have quite a long-standing, I guess, experience in the corporate space, in partnerships. I've worked in media advertising for quite a long time. It is a very sales-driven, KPI budget, but really, really client-focused role. So coming and working at the university where things like deadlines are not kind of spoken about, or if they are, they're certainly not met. The language barrier, incredibly hard to reframe and obviously understand what an academic's mindset is, what they're trying to gain, and then obviously replicate that in a corporate kind of language, but vice versa. So I will say that probably the experience of, the questions you can ask me can certainly help on, those difficult, how do you connect with client partners? What are the struggles you kind of have on that front? Because there's been a lot in the last year that I've learned on the work that's needed here and the help we can certainly do. So.
Excellent. Thank you for that introduction. So we have two very experienced partnership people here with us today, but I'm aware that not everybody in the room has that much experience with partnerships. So we thought we'd start with the first question. What do you do when you just want to, like you're just getting started? What are the first steps to building a partnership? And what kinds of pain points are you anticipating as you initiate a partnership? Who wants to go first?
You can go first.
Okay.
Because it's probably easier to answer that in the call.
Yeah. I guess the first thing you need to do is understand what is it that you're looking for. So if it's something to do with your course, if it's a work integrated project, what are the key goals you're going to need before obviously you go to a partner? Because when you do approach a partner, it's so crucial that you are clear in what you need and what you need from them. Because again, that language barrier, time constraints, it's often requests that you're going to ask from them, which is time, energy, resources that they most likely don't have. So as clear and concise as you can be about what it is you're looking for, but also keep in mind, you might actually just be building a relationship at this point. And I really, really want to hammer in there that every time you're going to speak to a corporate partner, it is not because you're going to walk away with the goal you have in mind. I talk about that time relationship building piece. Every single time you meet with that partner, it's crucial and important to build the relationship and that connection. And you might not get something for a year, 3 years, 7 years. But I guess when you're, hunting, is that the question on, cold calling, or like how do you even find the partner you're looking for? There are very many toolkits that are accessible. I don't know if you use a lot of CRMs, but the fact that Min and Kate are here and I'm here, you have got internal contacts within the university that actually do this as a role. We do find those partners for you. But by all means, we want to encourage you to have the confidence to go and speak to those partners yourself. Lean on your alumni, your internal contacts. Don't know if you use CRM like Salesforce, but we can certainly help you with that in terms of any past experience, whether it be old PACE students or current PACE students that are in different faculties. LinkedIn is your best friend. But yeah, I could really kind of deep dive into the cold calling aspect if you don't have any experience there, because it's quite difficult if you don't have, a start on that. So I'm happy to have a separate conversation individually, one-on-one, and how I can help there too.
In the community sector, I think that you often start from your existing relationships or from existing relationships within your own work group or within your student group. And I think that it's easy to overlook our students as a resource at times, but it's also very easy to overestimate what they bring to the relationship. So we want them to get some learning, some workplace-based learning experience. But we also know some of them bring high levels of skills and knowledge into that. But the critical thing about building a sustainable relationship is the trust. I'll talk a little bit about the planning program and the requirement to have some sort of work based accreditation. We had really good planning placements until we had one catastrophic student who broke so much of the trust that had been built over a number of years. And that is all for the relationships management. That is always the most difficult thing, and it's where the huge amount of work often comes in. When you're working with community organisations, you're often also working with people who have uneven skills in delivering what they've said that they'll deliver as well. So uneven skills in their ability to cope with or relate to the students we face with them as well. So I think you've got to be ready to be doing a lot of unplanned work in just having a relationship. Yeah? And I think it's really easy to forget that a lot of the value comes out of having the relationship rather than executing the actual activities. That what I think I saw in the work that we did in the local area was that we actually transformed. If I take the local Chinese community's approach to Macquarie was always third best. People would want their kids to go to Sydney or New South Wales to do accountancy or law or medicine, and that having people come onto the campus and feel like this was their local campus actually laid the foundations for recognising, A, that there was a domestic student market that we were almost completely ignoring, and B, that was such an important interface with an international student market as well. So understanding those relationships are actually more than just getting a student into a place.
Can I just add on to that slightly as well? Because you did touch on bringing them into the university and the idea of what a university is. And it is so key on building a relationship. Like an email or a text is not good enough when I'm talking about building a relationship with someone that you have a win with. It's inviting them to campus for a coffee or going to their office for a coffee as face-to-face value is so important. Phone calls and web video calls are next important, but to your point, this university is stunning. And I think when I thought about my university days, it was not a fun place, other than the bar. I had to go into my classes, and I think it's such an old school understanding. But if you can get your client, you can get them free parking, you can talk about how we've got some beautiful new buildings to show them, but getting them here and giving them the physical experience will absolutely help change that mindset of how they can build a relationship here and what that means.
That's great. We have a question from the audience. Keith.
So it's okay to ask questions. Just from the corporate point of view, you're getting a corporate partner. I was shocked when we started doing this WIL thing that we don't pay the partners. Because from their point of view, we're the big university that pays teachers. If they're coming in to teach, should they get paid?
Yeah.
So it would be so awkward to cold call a corporate person and be like, hey, can you come in and do this job for free, we'll pay you $0, and come and look at our big campus with these new buildings that we've shelled out all this money for. We're doing nothing.
Yeah.
For me, it's insulting.
Well,
I feel awkward asking them. And that's why I'm so glad that there's a whole team that can do it for me. I then ask my friends to come and do that because they expect it to go the other way, not them doing me charity. I should be doing them charity.
Yeah.
Or the university should.
Before you take the question, I'm just going to repeat it or synopsis for people on Zoom in case you couldn't hear, and then maybe you can let us know in the chat if you could hear, and I don't need to do this. But the question is, if we're the university and we're showcasing to them kind of our big new buildings and how great our campus is, particularly in certain disciplines, isn't there an expectation that we would be paying them rather than inviting them to come to campus for free? And at this point, I'll turn it over to you for your thoughts.
Love that question because like that I come from a very private marketplace where it's just money exchanged and product, obviously. So that perception coming here was a really interesting piece for me. What is our value proposition? Like, why are we getting them to give us this time and energy? What are they getting in exchange for that? Because a partnership is two ways. Keep that in mind. You're never going to a corporate partner and saying, hey, can we take this and we expect this? You need to understand, obviously, the sell of, and can I just also point out, you are each individually the expert in your field. And when you go meet with a partner, they will know nowhere near as much as you do with what you do, vice versa for their company, but you absolutely know what it is that you need for your unit, for your students, for the best outcome. So believe that you're an incredible, intelligent expert in being able to front them with these questions. But that value proposition is what we like to call a sell, understanding what it is for the client's perspective and the value that they get back. So in my kind of role, when I'm trying to bring a partner on board or kind of give them a widespread shopping list of opportunities of ways that they can work with us, because a lot of people just think, oh, like, how do you work with the university? You just give them money for research. Like, they don't understand they can come in for guest lectures, or they could help recruit or build out a project. So often with that shopping list, that sell is you're actually, skipping that recruiting process and selecting the top tier students, to come and work for you at the end of that 3-year degree. They're already pre-trained. So by the time they're leaving, you're not going through, another 6 months of training them up. You could talk about their brand experience and exposure on campus, especially with smaller companies or even larger companies. Optus is around the corner. It's in our Park District. It's one of our key partners. Telstra love to know that, because they want to get on campus. If Optus are doing something really cool, they want to get their brand on campus to kind of compete. So the selling aspect of why and how your client should be on campus really also does define in that beginning conversation. When you're meeting with them, if it's the first time, what do you do? What are the struggles of your business? What are you looking for to see for change? You have the opportunity to shape your next recruits that come out of university. What are the skill sets you're looking for? Like, at the moment, AI is the largest topic, and I had incredible IVP event, by the way, Coast is over here, ran it I think a few days ago, and I was on this great roundtable, and I had a corporate partner who gave some really great advice. She was like, one of the things I really love and look for when I have a candidate that's coming in for a job is, one, if they're passionate about something, but two, if they're passionate about something that we don't know. If they come into an interview and say, I'm really passionate about AI, and no one in that kind of corporate environment has that skill set already, they're expecting to see this from these students. It's leaning on those skill sets of what you can offer the company back in exchange. But also, just FYI, I found this out the other day, which is so helpful. Lecturing or coming in for class projects actually counts as volunteer days, and every company has volunteer days. So you can always put it back on your mate, saying, surely you have some volunteer days that you want to come and show your experience off to a bunch of students. So yeah, it's twisting the language and understanding the problems and the challenges to be able to make sure it's appealing, but it's certainly two ways.
But the other side of that is also, is don't underestimate the value that you might bring as an expert in your own right. So for the RIDE project, we used to run academic seminars in the town hall. We would actually bring the staff together every couple of months to get a seminar with an academic working on issues relevant to local government. So that the key professional staff would be there as an audience, benefiting from the research and understanding that comes out of the university. So it's not just what can you get, it's also what you can give, and not to underestimate the you in that's where the trust, I think, begins, that if you're willing to give. Just as an example, I was involved in this amazing project doing senior management training on cross-cultural stuff for Rio Tinto, where in the mid-90s, when they were moving from being the world's worst enemy to Indigenous people to trying to be their preferred industry partner. And working with those senior managers and seeing them come to an understanding of what they didn't know was just pretty remarkable. They still blew up to the board, so we weren't completely successful.
I was just going to have one thing. We have a very rich alumni network too, who don't necessarily want something back. they just want to pay it forward. So I have to talk to that. And I probably speak to Parliament every week, via an alarm every week.
Did we hear back if they can hear from the audience? Okay, great. So, to our next question. So, do you have strategies? You talked about how building partnerships is a long-term proposition. Do you have strategies for how you stay in contact with people and what kind of, you know, how frequently or kind of what you do to retain that relationship over the long term when you're not in an intense working together period? And if they go quiet at some point, what do you do about it?
I've never found that they go quiet.
I
The reality is, if the relationship's working, people will always be talking and listening to each other. I think that the really hard thing is when it's not working to keep enthusiasm for maintaining it as a relationship. And I think that for me, what I found interesting was that often the hardest work was within the university, not so actually building the collaboration within the university that allowed us to have this broader vision of a community, local government, local corporate sector relationship that could be as multifaceted as people could imagine. But most of the academics just wanted one little bit of it. They had blinkers. And I found it really surprising that my academic colleagues were often more blinkered than the corporate and government colleagues that were a bit excited by the diversity of understanding their community. So actually investing that time, which meant that it took an hour and a half for me to walk across campus, ever. No matter how much of a hurry I was in, that there was always dozens of people to stop. So you have to stop thinking about your own KPIs and think about what you see as the KPIs for the relationship. I think that might be.
Excellent, thank you. Kat, you say.
Yeah. I mean, certainly if, you know, you've got a great relationship and it's more often reactive, you know, they've come to you or they want to help, you're going to have probably no problem there with the communication front. I would say being the proactive position, if you're trying to chase down that opportunity, you have to, I guess one of the first lessons I had when I was a fresh account manager in the media days, you have to be resilient because you'll get no a lot or you will get the cold calls. In fact, Coast and I work quite closely where we will get really close with getting a deal in and then all of a sudden they just stop responding. So the first, I guess, point to that is just be resilient. This happens. Don't take it personally. Like they are busy, things come up, you know, other opportunities arise. But I guess to build that relationship and to feel if you're, you know, are you bugging them too much? How do you know where that communication kind of levels out? I would recommend if you've got what starts to be a good relationship from the beginning, to try and just put in a quarterly catch up in the diary. So it's kind of in there. You can move it when it comes closer to if needed. But if it's templated in the diary, you know, they kind of can't avoid it. It can be, keep it short and sweet if you want, if you're just building relationships at this point, but 15-minute, you know, half-hour check-ins or like, how's everything going? Just want to check that you're really happy or those students are doing really well, or you're getting what you need from us, or we want to give you an update on how it's going with our students, because feedback and that constant communication is key to keeping a warm relationship. You can't start a relationship, deliver on, you know, what you've both said and then leave it. And then 2 years time, you'd like to ask them again for some more help. You take them out for a coffee. If they've come to do a big project, like I've done a couple of capstones now, where I see the amount of energy that's coming in from these clients, you know, hour, 2 hours to come to a lecture, come back for a mentoring session at the end of the session, then come back again to, you know, look at all the presentations. Take that client out for a lunch or a thank you breakfast or just something where you can make them feel valued. So keep it warm, keep it phone calls, as much as you can.
Great. So I wanted to come back to something you said, Richie. You said, you know, that sometimes it would get off track. And I guess, well, I don't think those are the exact words you said, but you said something like when it's not going well, and you mentioned that usually that was an academic, not a partner issue. When things aren't going, like when you thought things were going all right, but somehow the conversation has gotten off track, do you have strategies for how you fix that?
So sometimes you do have a partner goes off track. And so I'll talk a little bit about Salvation Army. We had a great project for Salvation Army, which was a really high level collaboration produced film and politics. At some point there was a loss, shouldn't say a loss of faith, should I? With the faith-based organisation. But there were internal conflicts inside Salvation Army, where one of our key collaborators, who ultimately came and worked at Case Team, had become seen as a threat to her boss, and then started getting undermined by her boss within Salvation Army, and that was a really difficult thing to grapple with, because that meant there was internal wide-anting of the relationship upwards in Salvation Army from the middle of the relationship. And we had to work incredibly hard at that point to bring the project, because in that case it was a jointly funded, I've forgotten what they're even called, maybe it was a link or something, where there were reporting requirements. So we delivered all of those reporting requirements, but I don't think we ever were able to re-establish that level of trust within Salvation Army. Certainly not in my time. So sometimes you just have to do what's required and cut your losses. And sometimes you have to find workarounds. So the workaround there was to go to key players in the leadership team in Salvos and make sure they didn't allow the whole thing. But that one went to legal action internally within Salvos. There was another big project with Australian Red Cross, where I went to the university solicitor and said, if we had a mining company doing this to a research project, we would take them to court because they're in breach of their obligations under the linkage agreement. And the university solicitor said, we're not taking Red Cross to court. We'll do our reputation no good. So it took us 3.5 years to get a publication approved, which was part of their obligation.
So I have a follow-up question for you as well, but I want to see if there are any other questions from the audience or questions coming in from Zoom. So it had to do with, oh, there is a question.
I was going to ask if anyone has had a partner just fall off the boat and, they're sick or something, because it's very, like I was telling the students, one guy, this guy gets hit by a bus. I don't know what we do. So if anyone ever had that happen, it must have happened before, right?
I wouldn't say like a big drama, and again, I've only had 1 year experience here, but we've just lined up a client for a capstone unit, and there's technically 2 members within this specific team that can give the lectures and the mentoring. Turns out with the alignment, timing and the agreements, one of them is about to have their baby right before the presentations are due, and the other one's about to go on mat leave. So technically similar situation, but the 2 of them wouldn't actually be available for the end. And this was all kind of discussed up front, to the point where we were happy for having a sub from the same company, but knows about that team and was able to come in and help answer that. So being clear and upfront, but I mean, emergencies are a completely different situation. So if I was in that particular instance, it would be finding out if a co-worker or a colleague could kind of step in. I think there's a lot of, we talk about it, but a lot of pre-recorded lectures. And I don't know if anyone has seen the podcasting studios here in this building. And if you haven't, go check it out because they're incredible. I had a look the other day. There's 4 and they've been set up with green screens and recording studios. And I almost feel like this is where it's going now with these corporate partners that are coming in and giving us time. It's like, how can you record these bits and pieces that you can use for the embedded will, and bits and pieces where, for an example, you absolutely need to use the last resort of a resource would be useful.
Excellent. And that was kind of related to what I was going to ask about, was around the, you mentioned that sometimes people aren't as communicative as you would hope. And the thing is that if it's a will unit, we built it in for this time or that, or we have for some types of will partnerships, we have a contract that needs to be signed. And so what do we do in that instance? I think you pretty much answered that.
Yeah.
But is there anything you would add around pushing it over the line? Or I guess kind of the side idea that I was thinking about was around having multiple possible partners or something, but you don't want the people hanging or creating.
Yeah, you certainly want to have multiple warm leads, right? You can't just rely on one partnership forever. It's also nice for your students to get different tastes of different industries and partners. But back to I think a key important part to note, again, coming from the corporate side, of how you can be valuable for them and make it as easy for them. Often when I am speaking with the unit convener and I'm understanding myself on how capstones work and their requirements and timing and what's really needed from them, and just simplifying that out with however many hours, the dates, what's needed from them, everything in paper trail, obviously. So, you have something to fall back on if they weren't aware of something. But obviously all discussed in person at the very beginning. So my perspective is just be as clear as possible with as much information on dates, timings, and requirements. Let them know we've organised your parking for the day. We will help you. Here's the map. Here's the location. Happy to meet you beforehand for a coffee, whatever it is. Just be really, really accurate with what you need from them because they've got jobs and times and requirements as well.
Question for Richie. You mentioned earlier there was a project that sort of blew up because of a student. So, I mean, looking back on that, do you think there's a scope for vetting students before they go out and potentially discouraging certain students that you think may jeopardize a relationship, or is that ethically not appropriate? Like I don't
because you don't want to damage the community and giving it. And I mean, I work mostly in the Indigenous space, where I see white fella incompetence bubbling to the top of everything that's ever done to people. So sending incompetent students to do stuff that causes damage is ethically responsible. So what I think is sometimes difficult to judge is the students who perform worse than we might have anticipated. And that's where you end up, I think, having a responsibility to put a lot of time one-to-one into the student. Where they don't respond, don't show up, don't I mean, for example, I used to wear a suit to work because everybody in local government wears a suit. If you turn up to your placement in board shorts with your boogie board under your arm, it's not going to go down well. That's just a counselling issue with the student. We should know our students well enough to be able to place them. I don't think we often do because we're all under pressure. I'm not anymore. You're all under pressure to have more students than you can really get to know the person. So being clear about what those risks are is part of the your own risk assessment, and being clear about what you bring as a teacher and what they bring as students and what that relationship is, because that's sort of the hidden relationship in some of this, is that this is a teaching relationship. What's the reward that you get out of as a teacher? What's the reward that you get out of this process? I think is also important. I used to bang on in the PACE program about trying to find a way of getting that reward into the academic stuff, of seeing that you could actually use these activities to get longitudinal research projects where you can collect longitudinal data. But that's not how people often think about their teaching. Their teaching is not the most important part of what they do as an academic. And if their teaching's not the most important part, then their students are even less the most important part of what they do as academics. So I think that if you put in the groundwork to preparing students for what's expected of them and how to perform, then when somebody doesn't do it, it should be easier to address that. If you've done the trust building, the relationship building with the hosts, then they should be able to come to you and say, that person's crap, I just can't, and you should be able to pull them out before they do the damage and find an alternative, even if it's working with planning people in property rather than planning people in local government and begging for forgiveness from property, that they have to do some of your knocking someone into shape. Yeah. But it's using our internal relationships as well as the external relationships to build out our institutional capacity to have those bigger relationships. Or is the word impactful? Is that what we say these days? So, you know, but it does also come from that relationship between the teacher and the student. And I think that's sometimes the missing part of this process as well. We're just thinking of it as placing them into an existing slot that they have to fit into. It's never really.
I love your response to that, and I just want to add one thing, which is that on the student side, we as unit conveners can also put it in the unit guide, some language around the performance expectations or the standard that is expected, and if that's not being met, what will happen, and including up to finishing your placement on campus somewhere or something like that. Well, right. Well, and that if and being very aware and making sure that it's very clear that this number of hours has to be completed, and if it's not completed, but it will be, but that there's, the steps to fall down. Any other questions? We have this question that I think would be good to touch on, which is how do you, so sometimes the partners are complex organizations. Macquarie is definitely a complex organization. How do you manage sort of partner relationships and partner ownership and partner communication when you've got that complexity?
I can certainly touch on that because it's a really big, large part of what I do. So I'm in the corporate partnerships team that is in the RIE department. We look after all faculties. So we are often cross-functional in what we do. And as you can imagine, every opportunity under the sun that comes through us. So it's an interesting space as you have 4 faculties that will want to work with, say, Optus or a major partner, which is a beast in itself in the departments and the ways that they work. And often with large, complex organizations, there are touch points already within the university that you are absolutely not aware of. I am certainly not aware of. We are trying to do a bigger and better job of that in the corporate partnerships team. Understanding holistically what those accounts look like, where those main contacts are, so that if you were to come and ask to build a relationship there where you know what's happening, you can only ask so much from a client, knocking on that door 7 times about 7 different things from 7 different people. it's a bit of a bad relationship, obviously, that we don't want to portray from Macquarie University. So it's a difficult space, and things like CRMs like Salesforce are in place, which the PACE team do an incredible job of managing and looking after, and MIM can run reports whenever you're needed to know what there is specifically who we've worked with in the past. Again, with Kos and myself, we can also run reports, but it's, I think, understanding before you're treading on toes and potentially harming relationships, understanding already where that particular partner is working, where you could lean in on that, or where maybe there might be a different angle, or even a opposing client does the same thing, but they're also looking at working with us. Like Macquarie Data Centres have reached out to us recently of building a partnership with us in the park. There are 8 more data centres about to be built. If you know anything about data centres, they are not great for the environment. So I can imagine they have a lot of money and time and resources that they want to throw at the university to look good. So just understanding and knowing what you need and how we can help and where those touch points potentially are, it's a really good place to start, I would say.
It was around being a complex organization and managing partnerships.
We live in complexity. Universities are actually very good. They're creative. They don't always manage it well. But I started by saying we do 2 things, but those 2 key things are often not very visible in how we see ourselves. Yeah. So our graduates that go out, we talk about them as alumni, but they are amazing ambassadors if we've done a good job. If we don't do a good job, they're not such good ambassadors. But they can often be incredibly valuable. It's one of my frustrations that alumni are managed centrally rather than in the homes that they feel related to. So they're not alumni necessarily of the university, they're alumni of particular programs. And they're often hard to assemble as a resource. I think that recognising that our relationships within the university are part of that complexity, and that we have to manage that complexity, that's incredibly important. And so what Kath just said about understanding that a partner like Optus might have 15 things going on at once, and that each academic who thinks they're the most important person in the university can go in and tear that up, that relationship to shreds by doing something that they don't even know they're doing. And you multiply that across Macquarie Park, and then you multiply that across where all of those corporate partners sit, and because I think one thing that's a bit invisible at times is the relationships that those corporate partners have with community partners and how those things interplay. So, if you're trying to build a relationship with a local Indigenous group who refuses to have anything to do with liquor or gambling corporations, and you come in with a fantastic relationship with Star Casino, and you can't have that anymore, can you? With a casino or a betting organisation, then you're going to trample your relationship with that Indigenous group. Same goes in environmental fields. So it is complex. You just have to keep eyes and ears open and be ready to listen. I guess the thing I say, you have to be ready to listen to the complexity and not jump in and say, I'm right, I know what's going on. Yeah, there's wise heads around universities. You might have something to say to them that they don't know, but in conversely, you have to be ready to listen to them.
One last question.
Thanks, Jeff. I've just got a question to put to you. It sounds like the WIL things that you were doing were really rich for this like, sounds like they've got to go to the premises of the firm they're working at, work closely with private companies. In the subject I'm doing, I have 200 students, and it's sort of just not manageable to do that with 200 students. So we're sort of just hitting the minimum requirements of 3 meetings of half an hour length with a strategic partner. And honestly, it feels a bit of a hollow experience, because I had emails coming into this subject my first semester from international students saying, when will you allocate me an internship? And, you know, which leads to a job. I'm really excited. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you know, this subject is clearly being oversold to you. This is a box ticking exercise. I'd say that.
That's a great platform.
Requirements, and we'll do a project after watching a video, and like even the speaker that we've got didn't even come onto campus, it's just on Zoom, which I'm fine with, because, you know, we're not paying them, and I'm grateful for any of their time. But it's just, it feels like what you guys were doing is a rich, great experience. In some faculties or subjects, it's a hollow experience. Are we overselling it? And what do you think about that?
What subject are you teaching?
This is finance, issues in corporate finance or applied finance.
Okay. Well, I would say not every course or unit or even client has the time to give those rich time or internships or energy, right? So often my role is building that relationship to get there, and it won't happen straight away. In fact, the first potential win will be a guest lecture, because that's probably the easiest, and once they can come in and do that. So certainly it takes a while to build that up if they don't have the energy, time, resources to go straight away with that. But I guess with finance, it's an interesting one, because I mean, even Vito, right, has a lot of really great contacts and opportunities, and I'll often give a bit of opportunities to him and kind of hopefully filter down. But I think it sounds like you might need some help, or to lean on myself or Coast or Min to kind of have a chat with you, and who's your hit list target? Like, who would you love to come in and work or case study, and we can either look at what's happened in the past, or who we've spoken to recently, or we can unlock that for you. That's probably my experience.
That's great. And I think Kate has something to add.
Also, I mean, that's, there's lots of variance in the way PACE units are designed and how the projects are delivered, and what component of the PACE, the 150 hours of the PACE unit takes up is dedicated to the actual PACE activity component. And so I think in Richie's case, the PACE unit would have been very much focused on that PACE activity with very little other content around the outside that had, and they're the units that we're finding generally we get the best feedback from our students on, the ones where it's primarily based on the PACE activity. So depending on what other content's in your unit and how essential it is, then it's definitely an opportunity for us to look at that and see how it can be changed up a bit, and so that you can then create a richer experience, either that the students working in groups together and working on the project and having their questions answered, or if that corporate, your partner allows for groups of students to come through, maybe a couple of groups of students, the 200 students staying up at their office, it's not going to work. But there's definitely ways that we can enrich it. I think there's like the unit.
Olivera.
Olivera. So yeah, so that was a very much students, but it's large number of students working on business analytics project, and it works very well. And the students have really good, rich experiences from that. So just because it's 200 students doesn't mean we can't make it happen in that case.
I was going to say something similar. I think you took on the unit when there was, and we started looking for partners relatively close. I think with the lead time, we'll hopefully be able to develop some stronger, longer partnerships. And I think, I haven't actually heard the phrase used here, but we talked a lot about mutual benefit. And so finding the partner who actually wants this problem solved and is going to be psyched to have 15 teams working on that project to kind of
Free consultancy, we like to sell it as. So yeah, absolutely.
We certainly did a few things like that where we actually had teams competing to present marketing plans or developing surveys and present, developing web solutions for different community groups, and then going to those boards and selling them in a competitive format, which was pretty exciting for them as well. And yeah, it was then up to the partner to decide, oh yeah, we could go with both those ideas or none of those ideas, but the students all got from it.
And maybe the top teams end up getting that chance to go on site or something like that. So
Yeah.
we get a job.
And that does happen for those group activities where the partner has a presentation, given some of the students are identified as talent that they'd like to link with, so.
Actually, that was a question that came in that I haven't asked yet, and you might be the best position to answer it, which is how many students, what percentage of students who do a WIL activity end up getting employment?
Direct employment with that particular partner. I don't really know what the numbers are. We don't always know exactly how many there are. It's probably a relatively small number when we're talking about putting 8,000 students a year through placements. But even if they're not getting employed by that particular person they've worked for, the skills that they've developed and the ability to then go into an interview and talk about that is definitely a massive contributing factor to their ability to get the job after they finish here.
Fun fact I learned at the IPP Summit, there was an AAGE 2025 report, which is the grad report, and 97% of grads had undertaken WIL or some sort of placement prior to. So it was a huge stat to show that there's value there.
Amazing, yeah. And Kate and I were on the WIL Success Measures CoP last year with WIL Australia. And so I don't remember the stat off the top of my head, but the difference for graduates on the graduate outcome survey of having completed some form of WIL or having completed no WIL, it's a significant difference in employment.
Can I just add something about the employment thing and relationships? Is that I've had the experience where students may have done a placement with the organisation, that student doesn't get a job, but 6 months later, the employer rings me. We have, lots of good relationships. Let's just say it's Carers New South Wales, because this is the one that commonly rings me and says, Jacqueline, I'm just about to advertise for a project officer role and a research assistant role. Before I do that, have you got anyone in your current cohort that you want to advertise this with first? And so that kind of thing is quite common, because the partners have now got because we've been working together for an extended period of time, they understand who the graduates are, they understand the skill sets they have, and they go, oh, I may not have been able to offer something straight to the person I most recently had, but I know where to go hunting or fishing. And so that is sometimes the beauty of developing these relationships over time, is they become really, really familiar with the students. And yeah.
Excellent. I'm feeling very conscious of time. Was there anything else, Kate or Min, that you wanted to add to keep our feet on the ground?
Just when we talk about risk mitigation of partners pulling out at the last minute, I think that's one of our things. While we've got, particularly for the place space, because that's my area, we've got processes and forms and things to really clearly set out and give everybody guidance around what the expectations are for every part of the university student and the partner. In relation to that PACE activity, we generally ask that they have a secondary contact so that can back up. And then if everything goes haywire and we can't change dates slightly to make it work, then we do have the network of people you spoke about, where we've got students that are having trouble or whatever. We've got the network of people across the university that we can rely on to try and to provide back up in the case where somebody pulls out at the last minute. Or we have, and that's the other thing about the student support angle. The PACE team also is here to support if we're having difficulty with students who work with the convener and the host to try and find out whether we can support that student in that placement or whether we can find something else to do. If I have bigger the students that are not the bond as well. Just to let them know this is a great opportunity and they should really take it.
Excellent. Well, please join me in thanking Pat and Richie for sharing. That was a really rich conversation around rich, sustained partnerships. And we're at 10:02, so if people don't have time, I understand. But if you do have time, the last thing we were going to do is create little groups around the tables and just from what we've heard and talked about, identify 2 or 3 things that you can take away from this conversation and put into your practice. And normally, I would say have that conversation and we'll come back together, but I don't think we have time. So we'll go straight from that conversation to unstructured networking. And I remind you to have some food.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, everyone.